"You're embarrassing yourself just by being here, Rachel." My mother said it without looking up from her compact mirror. She was touching up her lipstick at the hostess stand of my brother's new restaurant, the one she and my father had mortgaged everything to fund, and I had just walked through the front door carrying a bottle of champagne. I had spent 20 minutes picking it out at the wine shop 2 blocks away. She snapped the compact shut. "We told you this was family only tonight. Marcus needs people who believe in him in his corner, not dead weight." I set the champagne on the nearest table and smiled. Not the tight, apologetic smile I used to offer. A real one. The kind that comes when you already know how the story ends. "I believe in him," I said. "I wouldn't miss this for anything." She narrowed her eyes like she was trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. I genuinely would not have missed this night for anything in the world. I found a seat near the back where the lighting was dim, and the servers hadn't finished folding the napkins yet. From there, I had a perfect view of the whole room. My brother Marcus moving through the space like he was already famous, shaking hands with the investors my parents had sweet-talked into attending, pointing at the exposed brick walls and the hand-lettered menu boards like he had built them himself. My father standing near the bar in his good blazer, the one he only wore to things that mattered. My mother orbiting Marcus like a moon that had finally found its planet. And me, invisible in the corner, the way I had always been. I ordered a glass of water and checked my phone. The email from my attorney had come in at 6:47 that evening. The assignment of debt had been recorded with the county at 4:12 p.m. Everything was official. Everything was clean. They had no idea I owned the building they were standing in. Let me back up, because to understand what happened that night, you need to understand what happened in the 18 years before it. My brother Marcus is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the reason our family did anything at all. Every vacation, every savings decision, every dinner table conversation eventually bent back toward him like a compass finding north. When Marcus got his driver's license, my parents threw a party. When I graduated summa cum laude from the University of Michigan, my mother sent a text that said, "Congrats, sweetie," and a yellow heart emoji. I used to think it was a personality thing, that Marcus was simply more magnetic, more interesting, more worth investing in. I spent years trying to figure out what quality he had that I was missing. I studied harder. I dressed better. I learned how to be funny at dinner. None of it moved the needle. It took me until I was 22 to understand that it was never about me. It was about them. My parents needed a vessel for their ambitions, and Marcus had volunteered. I had been born careful and practical and allergic to spectacle, which in our family translated directly to being born wrong. My father, Gerald, was a man who had failed at 3 businesses before I was born, and spent the rest of his life treating those failures as proof that the world owed him a winner. Marcus was going to be that winner. Every bad grade, every fired job, every borrowed 500 that became 1,000, became 2,000, was just the cost of incubating greatness. My mother, Donna, backed every bet. She didn't call them bailouts. She called them investments in potential. And me, I was their accounting error. I was the child they kept meaning to get around to. When I told them I was interested in real estate finance, my father literally laughed at the dinner table. "You want to push paper around for someone else's buildings?" he said. "Marcus is going to own things. You're going to manage spreadsheets for people who do." So, I went and managed spreadsheets for 8 years. And while I did, I learned how money actually moves. I learned the difference between equity and debt. I learned how banks package and sell distressed loans. I learned that the most powerful position in any financial transaction is rarely the one with the biggest title or the loudest voice in the room. My parents never asked what I was learning. They were too busy funding Marcus's next chapter. The restaurant idea had started 2 years ago. Marcus had decided at 35, with 0 culinary training and a credit score that would make a loan officer wince, that he was born to run a high-end farm-to-table concept in the Wicker Park neighborhood of Chicago. He had a vision. He had passion. He had a very expensive mood board. What he did not have was capital. My parents solved that problem the way they always did. They refinanced their house. They pulled out $160,000 in equity and handed it to Marcus without a business plan review, without a financial projection, without asking a single hard question. They also recruited 4 family friends to invest a combined $80,000, largely on the strength of my father's assurance that Marcus had the eye for it. The restaurant was called Meridian. It had exposed brick and Edison bulbs and a cocktail list that my brother had personally curated, which meant he had copied it from a bar in Brooklyn that he'd visited once and described ever since as a formative experience. I had watched all of this from a comfortable distance. I had not warned them. I had learned from experience that warnings aimed at my parents about Marcus landed like criticism of a religion. You were not arguing with logic. You were arguing with faith. And faith does not respond to evidence. What changed everything was a phone call I got 7 months ago from a woman named Patricia, who was the loan officer at the community bank that held my parents' refinanced mortgage. She was not calling to chat. She was calling because my parents were 4 months behind on payments, a detail they had apparently decided not to share with me or anyone else in the family. She was calling because the bank had been acquired by a larger regional lender, and that lender was in the process of packaging and selling its non-performing loan portfolio. She was calling because she had found my contact information in the file as an emergency reference listed there by my mother 3 years ago during a moment of uncharacteristic pragmatism. She said the bank was selling the loan at a significant discount. She said the new owner would have full rights to begin foreclosure proceedings. I asked her who the bidding was open to. There was a pause on the line. "That's actually not a common question from a reference," she said. "I'm not a typical reference," I told her. I submitted a bid the following Monday through a holding company I had set up 2 years earlier for exactly this kind of acquisition. I paid 61 cents on the dollar. The loan transferred to my LLC 6 weeks later. My parents had no idea because the servicing notification letter goes to the property address, and I had arranged through entirely legal channels to be the one who retrieved it from the mailbox. I want to be clear about something. I did not do this to destroy my family. I did not buy their mortgage because I wanted to watch them suffer. I did it because Marcus had found a new shortcut. 3 months ago, I had learned through a cousin that Marcus was telling people the restaurant owned the building. He was using that fiction to solicit a second round of investment from a new group of family friends, people who believed they were investing in an asset-backed business. He was describing a building that my parents did not own free and clear, a building with $160,000 of debt attached to it, as though it were collateral in his personal empire. He was, in the plainest terms, committing fraud, and he was doing it at a table my parents had set for him with a cloth they had woven out of their own retirement. I sat on all of it. I waited, and I waited for tonight, which was the grand opening. The night the second round of investors were expected to sign their commitments. I had been told by my cousin that Marcus had scheduled a brief formality, his words, during the dinner service where the investors would review and sign their agreements. I was going to be there for the formality. The restaurant filled up by 7. Meridian was genuinely beautiful. I will give Marcus Burst that. He had taste when someone else was paying for it. The lighting was warm. The music was right. The charcuterie boards on the tables were arranged with the kind of care that suggests someone had watched a lot of videos about it. I sat with my water glass and watched my family move through the room like they had won something. My mother found me once during the first hour. She stopped at my table without sitting down. "You're still here," she said. It was not a welcome. I told her I wouldn't miss it. She glanced around to confirm no one of importance was watching. "Marcus is about to have the best night of his life," she said quietly. "Please don't make this about you." For once, I looked at her, the woman who had shoved me toward the service station at a business meeting when I was 24. The woman who had told me twice that my career in finance was not a real thing people do. The woman who was standing in a restaurant I legally held the deed on, asking me not to make things about myself. "I'm just here to celebrate," I said. She moved away. I checked my phone. My attorney had confirmed. My contact at the city's business license office had confirmed. And David, my former colleague, who was playing the role of interested investor tonight at my request, had texted from the bar. "Ready when you are." Marcus had staged the signing for 8:30. In the back corner of the restaurant, he had set up a small table with 4 chairs and a leather folder containing the investment agreements. The investors, a couple named the Hendersons, and a retired teacher named Frank, who had known my father since the 90s, were settled into their seats by 8:25. Marcus was standing at the head of the table with the easy confidence of a man who has never once been held accountable for a mistake. My father sat to the side, beaming. He had already told 3 people tonight that his son had built this from the ground up. I walked over at 8:28 and pulled out the fourth chair. Marcus looked at me the way you look at a fly that has landed on your food. Rachel, this is a private meeting. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. Frank laughed nervously. The Hendersons looked between us. She's not part of this, Marcus said to the table as if I hadn't spoken. She's my little sister. She gets confused sometimes about what she's been invited to. My father leaned forward. Rachel, now is not the time. Actually, I said, it's exactly the time. I set my phone on the table face up. I had a document open. I turned it toward the Hendersons and Frank. Before you sign anything tonight, there are a few things you should know about what you're actually investing in. Marcus started to stand. Sit down, Marcus, I said. He sat down. I do not entirely know why. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the fact that I had never in my life used that voice with him before. This is the deed of trust on this building, I said, pointing at the screen. The property at 1847 North Damon Avenue, the one Marcus has been describing as an asset of the business. I scrolled down. This loan was issued 18 months ago against our parents' primary residence as collateral. It is currently 4 months in arrears. Frank put down his pen. What does that mean, in arrears? Mrs. Henderson asked. It means the payments haven't been made, I said. It means the loan is in default, and it means the building cannot be represented as an unencumbered asset of this business, which is how it has been described to you. My father's face had gone the color of old cement. That's not Marcus started. That's a technicality, I said, and slid the second document across the table. It was the assignment of debt, the one showing that my LLC had purchased the non-performing loan from the bank. I own this debt, I said simply. My company does. I purchased it 6 weeks ago. The table went very quiet. My mother had appeared behind my father's chair. She had heard something in the last 90 seconds that had rerouted her entirely from wherever she had been. She was staring at the document on the table with the expression of someone doing math they do not want to finish. That's our house, she said. Yes, I said. I don't own your house. I own the right to collect the debt or, in the event of continued default, to initiate foreclosure proceedings. You can't, my father started. Gerald, I looked at him directly. We had not made real eye contact in probably 4 years. I'm not here to take your house. I'm here to stop these people from losing their money on a misrepresented investment. And I'm here to give you options. Marcus pushed back from the table. She's lying. She's jealous. She has been jealous of me our entire lives, and she is doing this because she cannot stand to see me succeed. Nobody at the table moved. Marcus, I said, the investors you solicited received written materials describing this building as a business-owned asset. Those materials are factually false. Soliciting investment on the basis of false asset representations is fraud. I paused. I have copies of the materials. I have the emails. I have the text message where you told Frank the business owns the real estate free and clear. I've had an attorney review everything. Frank picked up his unsigned agreement and folded it in half. I think, he said carefully, that we should table this for tonight. The Hendersons were already standing. My mother put her hand on the back of my father's chair like she needed it to stay upright. Marcus turned to me with the particular fury of someone who has never, not once in his life, been stopped. You did this on purpose. You waited. You let us plan this whole night, and you waited. Yes, I said. Why didn't you just tell us? Why didn't you warn? I did warn you, I said. 3 years ago, when you started the second restaurant concept, I told Dad the numbers didn't work. 2 years ago, when you pulled the equity out of the house, I told Mom it was too much risk. A year ago, I called you directly and told you the investor materials for this round needed to be reviewed by a lawyer before you sent them. I picked up my phone. I have the voicemail where you told me to stay in my lane and focus on my little spreadsheet job. He didn't answer that. I looked at my father, the man who had called me a sunk cost, the man who had told me that watching a real man take a risk was the most educational thing I could do with an afternoon. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Not diminished, just actual size. Maybe, for the first time. Here is what I'm offering, I said. Option 1. I refer everything I have to the state's attorney, the investment, solicitation materials, the misrepresentation, all of it. Marcus deals with the consequences. You deal with the loan in default through standard channels, which at 4 months behind means foreclosure proceedings begin in approximately 60 days. My mother made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Option 2, I said. Marcus withdraws the investment offering tonight. He issues a written correction to Frank and the Hendersons. You deed the collateral property, your house, into a trust structure I set up. I restructure the loan with a 12-month forbearance. No payments due for a year while we figure out whether this business can actually survive. And what do you get? Marcus said, I get to not watch my parents lose their house because of you. I said, that's what I get. My father's jaw tightened. He was a proud man. Being saved by the daughter he had written off as a liability was going to cost him something that had no dollar figure. Why would you? My mother started. She stopped. She tried again after everything. I'm not doing it for you, Mom, I said. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do, and because I am nothing like the people in this family who confuse cruelty for strength. That landed. I watched it land. My father looked at Marcus for a long moment. The look of a man counting the cost of a 30-year bet and finally arriving at the true number. Give me the document, he said quietly. Gerald, Marcus started. The document, Rachel. I slid it across. He signed it without reading it out loud, without making a speech, without doing any of the things he would have done an hour ago. My mother watched from behind his chair and did not say a word. Marcus stood up from the table and walked away, not out of the restaurant, just away to the bar where he ordered something and stood with his back to all of us. I watched him for a moment. My brother, who had been handed every tool and squandered everyone, standing alone in the restaurant that had been built on a foundation he'd never bothered to check. I picked up the signed document and slipped it into my bag. The dinner service continued around us. The servers moved through the room with plates of food that no one at the investor table was going to eat. The music played. The Edison bulbs glowed warm over the exposed brick. It was a genuinely beautiful room. I went back to my corner table and finished my water. Frank stopped by on his way out. He was a quiet man, the kind who measures his words before he uses them. Your father used to talk about you, he said. When you were little, he said, you were the one who read the fine print on everything. He paused. Sounds like some things don't change. I didn't say anything to that. I just nodded. He left. The Hendersons had already gone. My mother came to my table at 9:15. She sat down across from me, which she had not done voluntarily and longer than I could remember. She folded her hands on the table and looked at them. You should have told us, she said finally. About the loan. About buying it. I know, I said. Why didn't you? I thought about the birthday dinner where they sat me at the kids' table because there wasn't enough room for me in the adult section of the party my parents had thrown for my own 30th birthday. I thought about the phone call where I had tried to warn them about the investment materials, and Marcus had picked up the extension and talked over me until I stopped talking. I thought about 17 years of being told in words and in silences that the careful way I moved through the world was something between a disappointment and a joke, because I said you wouldn't have listened, and I needed you to see it instead. She was quiet for a while. The restaurant hummed around us. He's going to be angry at you for a long time, she said. She meant Marcus. Maybe my father, too. That's okay, I said. You really won't take the house? Not if the forbearance terms are honored, and not if Marcus stops misrepresenting what this business owns. She nodded slowly. She looked like a woman dismantling something she had spent her whole life building, one piece at a time, in the middle of a restaurant that might not survive the year. I did not feel satisfaction. Exactly. I felt the particular exhaustion of having been right for a very long time, about something you wished you had been wrong about. Go check on Dad, I said. He looks like he needs someone to stand next to him. She stood up. She paused. You're going to be fine, she said. It was not an apology. It was not the thing I actually wanted to hear. But it was, I think, the closest she knew how to get to one. I know, I said. I've been fine. I left before dessert was served. I walked out into the October air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the restaurant through the window. My father was back at the bar. My mother was beside him, touching his arm. Marcus was somewhere in the back. In the kitchen, maybe. Or somewhere he didn't have to be looked at. The room glowed behind the glass, beautiful and expensive and built on a lie, the way so many beautiful things are. I turned up the collar of my coat and walked toward the L stop, 2 blocks. The wind off the lake had teeth in it, the way Chicago always does in October, and I had forgotten my gloves. And I did not care even a little bit. I had 47 unread emails. I had 3 properties under review for acquisition. I had a meeting Monday morning with a developer in the West Loop who needed someone to structure a debt buyout on a mixed-use building. I had work to do and a life that I had built. One careful, unremarkable spreadsheet at a time into something no one in my family had ever thought to ask about. The train came. I got on. The careful child always sees the fine print. They just wait until the right moment to read it aloud. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more insights into the quiet power behind the numbers.